So 6.0 is here, and y'all are going to be big mad about it. Like, I'm already afraid of what the comment section is going to look like. Anyway, let's get into it. So, in terms of broad strokes changes, we have the expansion of the Data Vault, new PvP map, new Biovore enemy who will poop spore mines everywhere, and, well, we know how that's going to go. Some emotes, armory data changes, a new difficulty, FOV slider, opt-in PvP crossplay for consoles, new finishers, additional mastery for full weapon progression, and bonus XP to quick match. So, this is in addition to the season pass content where you're going to get Salamander and Vanguard cosmetics. So if you're a fan of war crimes against Eldari children, or like to have no one know you even really exist, well, you're in luck. Also, bee keys. Anyway, talking about the Data Vault real quick. Let's move over there. So there are ordeals. A good chunk of these are backwards compatible, which is cool. So you unlock tasks, accrue purple currency, and from there, you come over to the research center and unlock extra lore bits. So for those of you who don't already have a significant portion of your brain devoted to Warhammer lore, you're in luck. As for the changes to currency here, if you come to the Armoring Hall and then come over to this guy, you can now do a 3-for-1 trade of 1 level of armory data for the next, or sell 1 armory data for 40 requisition, 60 or 90 depending upon, green, purple, gold. Cool. Extra options for the overall economy. Great. Moving on. Gameplay and balancing is really going to be the lion's share of this video, just because there are so many sweeping changes. Yes, we're going to be streaming later today. I imagine sometime between 8 and 9 p.m. Central. Trying to take a look at all of the perk changes and what builds that negatively affects and how you can work around it. I will get updated build guides to everyone as quickly as possible, but it's a lot. Anyway, moving on. So we have the Data Vault that we just talked about, new PvP map, cool. Stoked to see PvP players get more love. I don't do that, so I'm going to leave that to people who, that's their bag to talk about. We have a very punchable face in the Biovore. We'll see how this winds up turning out in terms of overall balance and how much the spore mines make you want to hate life, and we'll see. We've got new emotes. So, come in game, hold down B on keyboard. Not sure what it is on controller. You have an emote wheel. Enjoy. Also, Saber. Come on. Sign of the Aquila. When? Armory data refinement we just talked about. We have a new PvE difficulty. Absolute. So, if we take them at their word, they say this difficulty is focused on new, more diverse enemy packs that bring extreme challenge. Resources and ammo are also more limited. So if we look down here at the modifiers, it says up to 3 extremis spawn simultaneously. Everything else is still the same. First in cap is immortal, blah. However, supply drop rate is decreased and ammo caches are limited for each squad member. Now, the extent to which this is a factor, we'll see. It almost feels like they're doing a diet version of the Cataclysm mod. I haven't run any missions since the patch, just because it did come out like 6 o'clock a.m. my time. We'll take a look at it on stream later, see just how gnarly things are. Moving on, we have the FOV slider on PC, so slide away to your heart's content. Just try to find a happy medium between being able to see everything and the performance impact of having to render more stuff. You can opt in on PvP for consoles, which sounds cool in terms of reducing your overall queue time, and also makes me kind of concerned for the overall player count of the game if we're having to crossplay to reach like reasonable queue times. Don't know, might be a bit tinfoil hatty. We have new animations on finishers, one for the Zoe, 2 for rubrics, and 1 for the Scarab. Cool. This one was just sort of in here without a whole lot of fanfare. Additional mastery for full progression. When a weapon is fully upgraded, the player is now awarded an additional mastery point, which works retroactively. So, if we come over here, take a look at the power sword. Because we've maxed it out to relic, you can see that we now have an extra mastery point. Turn the camera off so you can actually see what we're doing. So, this, I feel like, is going to open up a great deal more opportunity for build diversity. Less so on terms of like a character level, but in terms of each individual weapon. So previously, we had to make some very choices about how we were pathing, but this opens up extra options. Moving on. We have an additional XP bonus if you play in Quick Match as a reward for not being able to select the operation you're playing. Cool. Free is the best flavor, especially so when it's applied to free XP. We have the Salamander and Vanguard cosmetics. Nifty. Get after your fashion souls. Enjoy. But some bug fixes about customization and chapter decals are now available for right pauldrons for all the Deathwatch stands. Now, gameplay and balancing. We're really only going to give it the most cursory overview here, just because the changes to each class are so in-depth, too crunchy to really get into in terms of patch overview. Like that would wind up being a 45-minute long video, and you don't want to watch a 45-minute long video of me reading patch notes. I don't want to record that. Y'all can read. We're going to do like high-level review here. So they say that while there are some nerfs in this list, the vast majority of changes are buffs that should benefit different playstyles. Face value, yes, that is an intellectually honest statement. However, the specific nerfs that are in place were to the talent perks that were consistently chosen. So this is build diversity by way of nerfs, not build diversity by way of balance, which doesn't feel great. Anyway, for the tactical, right at the top here, they talk about fixing damage bonuses from multiple Auspex scan perk stacking incorrectly. However, they don't tell us how this math is working under the hood. I'm going to link up there a couple of my previous shorts speculating about how the Auspex math could work. With this wording and these changes, it seems as though they might be swapping over to that multiplicative worst case scenario I was talking about. I don't know, because the entire system is very opaque. We'll test it later. Figure it out from there. So by and large, you got a grip of buffs to underperforming talents as the tactical. However, these really don't change a lot of the tactical's talent choices you're going to go with, just because of the way synergy works between talents, or the fact that the other two options on that column are mediocre. Most noteworthy here are Plasma Boost, which moves the activation threshold from 50% overheated to 30%. You get an extra 10% additive damage, and you reduce the cost of charge shots by 1. So those of you who really like the Plasma Incinerator, you're going to be stoked. Those of you who really don't, well, maybe learn to, because the grenade launcher also just got mega nerfed, which, to be fair, they did say was coming. This isn't a surprise. Put away your shocked Pikachu face for a second. The grenade launcher got nerfed twice, both in terms of the damage that it does on a per level basis, as well as having the perk Emperor's Chosen or whatever that would refill your entire reserve of grenades. That no longer is the case. It only restores one per application of the perk. Does this hurt? Yes. Is this going to make it so you can't instantly delete bosses with Auspex and grenades? Yes. Is this also going to break the class? No. Is it annoying that we have to work around it when so many other things are underperforming or broken? Yes. Anyway, generally we have flat buffs to damage all around, and Radiating Impact in the patch notes is perhaps the first of several more significant changes that they've brought with this patch, which adds damage scaling by difficulty to many of the perk points. So previously, what I'm assuming is the case is they would have one specific damage number, but that number didn't change to accommodate the shifts in enemy health that existed with each progression up the difficulty curve. Now we have it set so that depending on the difficulty you're in, it proportionally increases the damage of those attacks, which is nifty. Kind of weird that it didn't do it before. Whatever. Let's just be happy about getting a buff, yeah? So when it comes to the tactical as a whole, you're really looking at buffs to a whole lot of things that many people weren't taking anyway, a nerf to the stacking of Auspex. We'll see just how much that hurts and if that warrants changing over into perhaps a build that doesn't overemphasize Auspex. That's going to take testing. For the Assault, they did some rather peculiar things in that they did flat damage buffs across the board to many skills, flat nerfs to others, and also further nerfed the Assault's survivability, which the survivability is the main reason why the Assault is much, much harder to play and potentially underrepresented in like difficulties of lethal and now absolute. I don't really understand where they're going with this one. I mean, sure, it plays into the class fantasy of, yeah, I'm a strap a giant, irresponsibly large jetpack to my like shoulders and just yeet myself into the enemies and what happens, happens. And yet, that doesn't really seem like a great gameplay experience. Anyway, so flat damage buffs pretty much everywhere. The nerf here that I was talking about was they fixed incorrect armor restoration to better reflect the intended effect of the perk. So, the Gunstrike armor restoration was refilling your entire armor bar when it was only intended to refill one pip. How much this hurts, we'll see. I don't know. But for the class that already didn't have a lot of sustain, this feels bad. A significant reduction on consecutive executions cooldown. Proven efficiency. Let's double check that one real quick. So I was looking at it earlier. Yeah. So this is the one that was very common to take, if only because the other two perks were lackluster, in that it increased all squad members' gunstrike damage by 50%. That has been changed to 30%. How much this hurts? I mean, yes, we can mathematically suss that out, but in terms of like moment-to-moment gameplay, that's going to take some testing. Because realistically, like, sure, 20% more melee damage against Extremis and Terminus, cool. All squad members' abilities recharge 10% faster, also cool. I feel like we're probably still going to wind up sticking with proven efficiency, just because of how breakpoints work. But again, that'll take some testing to figure out. Vanguard. I'm not really surprised here, just because the Vanguard has been, in my eyes, the most balanced and complete class. We do see some significant nerfs to the Vanguard. Yes, they talk about making buffs to moving target, retribution, zone of impact, blah, blah, blah. However, all of those exist on perk columns where there are other better options. In the case of flat 10% extra damage to Majoris and higher, wider perfect parry and block windows so that you can use the balance knife or the block knife and not hate life. Arguably, sure, this does technically increase build diversity. But if you're predominantly concerned with being the most effective you can, a lot of these changes aren't going to matter much to you. With the exception of the significant nerf to Adrenaline Rush. The health restoration is reduced from 10% to 5%. This hurts. Is it going to make me switch back to cheat death? Probably not. However, this is still like a reduction in how consistently effective you can be, especially when you might be playing with pugs, and the degree of communication about health restoration and who's using what is less feasible. The other significant nerf to Vanguard came in the form of Inner Fire, which now makes it only apply to Majoris and higher. I'm not super mad about this one. I mean, yes, it was kind of silly, but also cool to be able to just stomp on a gaunt and, get that recharge going. It's fine. It's not going to break anything, but it feels bad. The rest of these are, increases to damage or duration changes or like the scaling based on difficulty that we talked about before. You can go through those, see if it's going to change your build significantly. I don't really see it impacting builds realistically. We'll figure it out later. Sniper got a grip of changes. They added a bonus damage value to your first shot out of cloak, just across the entire class. That's 25%. Iron Grip has been reworked to now include less weapons spread and recoil, and give a damage buff against Terminus level enemies by 15% for both the Bolt Sniper and Stalker bolts. Now, recoil, cool. I'm not super worried about that. You can fight recoil just by pulling your mouse down or pulling down on the right analog stick. Weapon spread, however, any reduction there is nice because, well, the smaller the cone that you're firing bullets into, the more likely you are to hit a head. Again, this only applies to the Bolt and Stalker, but if I was playing the Sniper, I am sick to death of the Las Fusil, even though it's arguably the most effective weapon there. This would make the Stalker significantly better, especially in terms of boss DPS. So enjoy that. Purification now restores all contested health when you manually activate Camo Cloak. It's a nice extra panic button. Changes in heavy hit protection and knockback for persistence, bonus damage to melee mastery, dexterous hands. The added bolt carbine spread and recoil reduction effect might make the SMG version of the Sniper more viable to play. The times I've tried that, the main limitation there has been one of ammo economy, so we'll see what sort of changes this actually produces. We have a 10% movement speed boost to efficient readiness, extra damage bonus to adaptability, bonus damage to tactical ambush and ambush, and reduce the number of consecutive headshots to activate Pattern of Excellence from 4 to 3. This might actually get me to change from evasion. Generally, I'm a fan of evasion just because, having 5 seconds of free cloak anytime you get a perfectly timed dodge, that's nice, especially with a cooldown of only 15 seconds. But this now changes it to 3 consecutive headshots, restores an equipment charge by 1 instead of 4. 3-minute cooldown, of course, but I imagine you could do some silliness with the Melt Bomb and the Carbine build in particular here. For the Heavy, unless I'm misreading things, it's buffs all around for the Heavy. So enjoy that. Outside of that, there was a typo with conversion field, which stated the perk to work at 100 meters instead of the actual 10. So fixing the typo, but mechanically, the talent has been working the same way it has been. If you like it, cool, stick with it. If not, okay, change. So for the Bulwark, this is the other one that's going to make people mad. They say at the top here, overall, a few perks have been swapped. We noticed that players were making the same build for Bulwark with some minor differences, and swapped 2 pairs of perks to provide players with more build options, making the perk sets in tiers more versatile. I take issue with how they're presenting this, but that's just the pedant in me talking, really. So Conviction is doubled. Armor of Contempt now scales by difficulty. Let's swap over to the Bulwark real quick. So that's this guy. When you block a ranged attack, enemies within 10-meter radius take the damage instead, which sounds cool. Up until you consider the fact that as of last testing, which was after 5.1, Armor of Contempt was still broken, in that it would work in the beginning of a mission, and then seemingly randomly, after you've gotten through some checkpoints, it just stops proccing. So it's cool that it scales. I would also hope that it actually goes now, too. We'll see. All right, Focused Restoration has been completely reworked. So now every 40 seconds, all squad members automatically restore 1 armor segment instead of reducing the delay before your armor starts to passively regenerate by 5 seconds. They call it out pretty specifically here when they say that this perk hardly works in combat and essentially only reduces the wait for armor to regenerate in between combat episodes. Good change overall. That said, Focused Restoration is on the team perk tier. So it's competing with contested health fading 50% more slowly, and all squad members take 20% less damage from Extremis and Terminus. So it's nifty that this got a buff. It's still a pretty hard sell over Advanced Conditioning in my eyes. Moving on, we've got some buffs to Concussive Force, Purity of Purpose, Intimidating Aura. However, Intimidating Aura to pair with the damage scaling by difficulty now has a 5-second cooldown. Just for the refresher, in case you're not aware, this is the perk that gives you AoE damage within 5 meters every time you parry. Except now it's every time you parry, once every 5 seconds. Nerf, yes. How significant this is going to be, I don't know. This might be a death by 1,000 cuts thing in terms of the patch writ large. Rapid Regeneration now lasts for 10 seconds instead of 5. Extra bonus damage to Merciless Resolve. Fix some typos in Glory's Shield. Buffs everywhere else. However, we have the same thing that happened with the Assault, in that armor reinforcement was fixed to now restore 1 armor segment per non-lethal gun strike instead of completely refilling it. This one might also hurt. We'll see. Now the big one, Invigorating Icon, which pretty much everyone took anyway. We now have double the cooldown of the ability if you take the perk. So if we look at it, you still have the all squad members regain maximum contested health, but you're going to be doing it half as often. This one hurts, especially if you were playing Vanguard like a medic. Maybe this exists to have the Apothecary class, when they eventually bring it into the game, have a niche. If that's the case, admittedly that does feel a bit tinfoily, make that change when the Apothecary's here instead of ahead of time. Best way to work around this is make friends with a Vanguard who has more than 1 brain cell and runs Inner Fire. For weapons, We fixed some incorrect numbers and perk descriptions for the multi-melta, the heavy bolter, and the heavy plasma, and for melee weapons. Finally, we have some meaningful changes to the Power Fist. It's one of the least popular melee weapons. We are making it more practical in combat by extending its AoE damage and making it easier to charge. So, this actually addresses both of my main complaints about the Power Fist for most of the classes. Yes, it's still subpar for Assault, but that's just because of how the Assault's mechanics actually work. No, don't at me, math. But, changes. Maximum charge time for the fist has been reduced from 3.9 seconds to 2.5. That's a pretty significant increase in how quickly you can actually get attacks out. Hold attacks can now be partially charged. Now it's 2 quicker charges for 50% smaller bonuses. In terms of moment-to-moment experience, I would anticipate this being very similar to how Aftershock works for the Assault, where you have breakpoints on each sound cue, and each level will do varying degrees of damage, and you can figure out your most effective charge level per DPS. Nifty. The big one is that the forward cone damage is increased up to 10 meters, making it more viable in mid-range. If you'd been using the Power Fist before this patch, you know that it doesn't really have a whole lot of reach, and the reach it had was limited to how long your arm is. Yes, I'm aware that's hyperbole. Anyway, that now extends out to 10 meters, so it actually addresses that AoE concern that I had about the weapon. How viable this makes it, we'll see, but it's nice to have other options. Firearms. Reminder that this is for PvE only. Extra buffs to all of the bolters, anywhere between 5% on the Instigator and Heavy Bolt, all the way up to 10% on the Oculus Bolt. So this is cool, and doesn't solve the main problem, in that the way the game calculates damage is still overly reliant on headshot damage multipliers. So if you're not hitting something in the head, you may as well not be shooting it. This really doesn't change any sort of tiering of the bolters, because the weapons that were good before are going to continue being good, but now have a slightly higher base damage. This does technically open up more options for weapon choices, just because you're going to be nerfing yourself comparatively less in relation to the enemy's health by picking a weapon that doesn't have one of those higher headshot modifiers. Cool, I guess. Play with the weapon you want, so long as you're not negatively impacting other people's play experiences because you're ineffective. We'll see. We have the grenade launcher rebalance we talked about before, dropping from 25, 100, 100 to 25, 50, 75. They do include a clip of clearing out a wave of Majoris, evidently on lethal. So you do still get wave clear, but I imagine this is to cut down on being able to instantly delete bosses. However, that then leads into the changes to equipment. So all of the explosive weapon resistance that applied to the Hive Tyrant and other Terminus level enemies has been reverted, removed, redacted, reverted. That comes along with a 10% buff to the Melt Bomb, an 8% buff to crack grenades, and a return to the negative 0.25 from 0.4 for explosive and grenade launcher damage. So realistically, the Hive Tyrant's going to go back to having a real bad time. Other changes, quality of life stuff. Can't vote to kick people in the final stages of an operation, which is cool. Griefing is hot garbage, and if you do it, you should rethink your life. You don't want to sell me death sticks. Grapnel launcher can now proc the execute on anything less than 25%, provided you take the perk that does that. Cool. I mean, I was always kind of more annoyed that it would automatically go into it because I use the grapnel mostly for mobility. And accidentally taking an execute from somebody who might desperately need it feels bad. It's fine. Big one here is that you can no longer take damage when you're in the animation of getting pulled to the enemy. I don't know about you, but I have certainly gotten sniped mid-zipline, and that sucks. What would be really cool is if they then also applied that to the jump pack while it's in its dash from the hover to the ground pound. Unfortunately, that's not the case. They did, however, fix some bugs where you would randomly fly up or get stuck on the air. Nifty. Other fixes about gun strikes and parries and input queues. Cool, you can read that. PvP changes, bug fixes. Some changes in damage scaling to the synaptic shock and friendly fire damage to scale with difficulty, which is nice. You can, provided you can actually do it, perfectly dodging Zoe and Neurothrope beam attacks will trigger Gunstrike, which is cool, especially for the melee classes. That said, the hitbox on that attack is still kind of wonky. Other fixes to AI, animations, and interactions with players. Zangor Enlightened have now been nerfed pretty significantly, in that they're not going to kickflip their way across your screen and then instantly delete you with their explosive spear. So, cool. Other changes to Flamers, Bolters, and Scarab Occult Terminators. They shoot less rockets, Flamers fire less far, etc. Nice. Bug fixes for operations and other general fixes. Most notable here were the one that was causing partial save loss in rare cases, as well as the ongoing bug with the Heavy's primary weapon. We'll see if this actually does fix things, or if other exciting things get broken, and go from there. Miscellaneous tech fixes, and there we go. Overall, we knew some of these nerfs were coming. At the same time, that does still make it unpleasant, even though we anticipated them. In terms of what this is going to do for the game, like, yeah, sure, this might encourage a little bit more build diversity, but as I said at the outset here, this is build diversity by way of nerfs as opposed to balance. Yeah, considering the precedent we have with patches 4.0 and 5.0, I'm curious how long it's going to be before we have a 6.1, which rolls some of these changes back. I don't know. We'll see. Depending on when you're watching this, I'm doing this the morning of the patch. We will be live tonight, probably sometime between 8 and 9 Central, testing some of these changes and figuring out new builds. So, come and hang out. Otherwise, I've been Bald Squid. I'll catch you next time.